Welcome back to Minds at English. Today, we're going to learn something both fascinating and haunting, one of the greatest mysteries and tragedies in history. The story of the Titanic. You may think you already know it. Maybe you've seen the famous movie or read articles about it, but I promise, once you listen to this, it will feel like you're hearing the story for the first time. We'll dive deep into every detail, some that might even shock you. So, sit back, relax, and let's journey back in time. Along the way, you'll not only discover the secrets of the Titanic, you'll also improve your English listening and understanding. The Titanic was never just a ship. It was a symbol of ambition, innovation, and the human dream to conquer the impossible. In the early 1900s, ocean travel was not just common, it was the only way to cross continents. Two shipping companies were in fierce competition to dominate. The seas, White Star Line and Cunard Line. Cunard had the edge in speed. Their ships, the Lusitania and the Mauretania, were among the fastest in the world. But White Star Line had a different goal. Instead of just speed, they wanted to create ships of unmatched luxury and size, something the world had never seen. Their grand plan was to build three massive ships, the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Britannic. Of these, the Titanic would become the most famous, though not for the reasons the company hoped. Construction began in 1909 in Belfast, Northern Ireland, at a shipyard called Harland and Wolff. It was a colossal project. Thousands of workers built the Titanic over 3 years. By the time it was finished in 1912, it was 882 feet long, almost the length of 3 football fields, and stood 175 feet tall. To people of that time, it was unimaginable. The Titanic was designed with advanced technology for safety. It had 16 watertight compartments that could be sealed if the ship was damaged. Engineers believed that even if 4 of these compartments were flooded, the ship would still float. This led people to call the Titanic unsinkable. The media repeated it. The public believed it. Even the vice president of White Star Line, Philip Franklin, publicly declared, "There is no danger that Titanic will sink." That confidence, as we'll see, would prove to be deadly. Now, imagine boarding the Titanic. The interiors weren't just elegant, they were breathtaking. Designed like a floating palace, the ship resembled a 5-star hotel more than a ship. First-class passengers were treated to carved wood paneling, golden chandeliers, fine marble, and stained glass ceilings. There were 2 grand staircases, one of which became iconic, the first-class staircase, with its ornate ironwork, polished wood railings, and a beautiful glass dome overhead. This was where the wealthy passengers gathered, dressed in gowns and tuxedos, showing off their diamonds and pearls. But the Titanic was more than just appearances. It had facilities no other ship at that time offered: a heated swimming pool, a Turkish bath, an electric bath which was considered a health luxury at the time, a gymnasium, squash courts, libraries, barber shops, and a cafe styled like those found in Paris. There were multiple dining rooms, and the a la carte restaurant was so exclusive that even first-class passengers had to pay extra to eat there. Their rooms were decorated with silk drapes, fine wood furniture, and the best linens available. Even second-class cabins on the Titanic were more luxurious than first-class cabins on many other ships. And third class, while simple, offered immigrants comfort and safety that most ships didn't provide. The Titanic cost $7.5 million to build in 1912. That's about $200 million today. Ticket prices matched the luxury. A first-class ticket could cost over $4,000 back then, equivalent to over $100,000 today. Second-class tickets were around $60, about $1,500 today, and third-class ranged from $15 to $40, roughly $400, to $1,000 in today's money. Unsurprisingly, first-class passengers included some of the world's wealthiest people. The ship was ready. Excitement filled the air. The Titanic's maiden voyage was set, from Southampton, England, to New York City, USA. On April 10, 1912, crowds gathered at the port, families waved goodbye, and cameras flashed. On board were 2,224 people, including famous names like John Jacob Astor, one of the richest men in the world, and Molly Brown, who would later be known as the unsinkable Molly Brown. Also aboard were immigrants and third-class families, hoping to start a new life in America. For them, Titanic represented a dream. For the first few days, everything went smoothly. The ship sailed across the Atlantic at a steady speed of 21.5 knots, about 40 kilometers per hour. The sea was calm, the skies clear, and life on board was full of elegance and excitement. Passengers dined, danced, exercised, and enjoyed their voyage. But beneath that calm surface, danger was approaching. On April 12th and 13th, and especially on April 14th, the Titanic received multiple iceberg warnings, 7 in total. Other ships, in the North Atlantic, had spotted large icebergs in the area and used Morse code to send warnings. However, not all messages were marked urgent, and many didn't even reach the captain. The wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, were busy sending messages for wealthy passengers and reportedly ignored some of the warnings. Even the ones that did reach Captain Smith were not acted upon with seriousness. The Titanic continued at full speed. The night of April 14th was unusually still. There was no moonlight, and the ocean was eerily calm, almost like glass. That might sound safe, but it made icebergs harder to spot. Normally, waves crashing against an iceberg would give it away. But that night, everything was quiet. Two lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, were in the crow's nest. They didn't have binoculars. The only pair had accidentally been taken off the ship by a departing officer. Suddenly, at 11:39 p.m., Fleet saw something dark and massive directly ahead. He rang the warning bell 3 times and called the bridge. Iceberg right ahead? First Officer William Murdoch acted fast. He ordered the ship to turn and the engines reversed, but it was too late. Just 37 seconds later, at 11:40 p.m., the Titanic struck the iceberg. It didn't smash into it head. Instead, the iceberg scraped along the starboard side of the ship, tearing open its hull below the waterline. Now here's the shocking part. The iceberg wasn't just a floating chunk of ice. It was an ancient, 100,000-year-old giant 400 feet long and weighing 1.5 million tons. And although Titanic was made of metal, the steel used back then was brittle in freezing temperatures. When the iceberg scraped the side, it didn't just dent the hull, it tore along thin holes. The rivets holding the metal plates together made of weak iron popped out under pressure. Water flooded in. At first, most passengers felt only a soft jolt. Some joked about it, thinking they'd hit a small boat or a piece of ice. But down in the engine rooms and lower decks, crew members saw the truth: water pouring in at an alarming rate. Watertight compartments were now being tested. But the iceberg had damaged 6 compartments. The ship could only stay afloat with 4. Captain Smith was alerted. He knew immediately the Titanic was going to sink. Still, many passengers had no idea what was coming. The ship was brightly lit. The band played cheerful music to keep spirits high. But behind the scenes, chaos had begun. Smith ordered the lifeboats to be uncovered and distress calls to be sent out. CQD and the new SOS signals were sent in all directions. The Carpathia, a ship 58 miles away, responded. Captain Rostron of the Carpathia immediately changed course and pushed his ship to full speed. But it would take at least 4 hours to arrive. The Californian, a ship closer by, didn't respond. Their wireless operator had gone to bed. Meanwhile, the Titanic crew started loading the lifeboats. But confusion ruled. There had never been a real emergency drill. Many passengers believed this was just precaution. Some didn't want to leave the warm, beautiful ship. Others thought the small wooden lifeboats looked too unsafe. The result? Lifeboats were launched half empty. One lifeboat that could hold 65 people left with only 28 on board, down in 3rd class. The situation was even worse. Locked gates, language barriers, and lack of information trapped many passengers. Families struggled to find the way to the upper decks. While some first-class passengers refused to leave their jewelry or warm cabins, others in 3rd class didn't. Even though the ship was sinking. By 1:30 a.m., the bow of the ship was fully submerged. The Titanic tilted forward. People now realized they were in a nightmare. Panic broke out. Still, the band kept playing, and it was here, in the freezing darkness of the North Atlantic, that the Titanic's final hours truly began. The ship was too much, and the Titanic broke into 2 pieces. The 2 halves of the ship sank separately. The bow plunged downward first, heading straight to the ocean floor, moving with terrifying speed through the black, icy water. The stern, the back half of the Titanic, remained above the surface for a few more moments. It stood almost upright, towering into the night sky, as terrified passengers clung to railings, lifeboats, or one another. Then, with a final groan, the stern slipped beneath the surface, disappearing forever into the cold depths of the North Atlantic. It was now around 2:20 a.m., and the Titanic, the largest, most luxurious ship ever built, was completely gone. What remained was silence, a terrible, almost unnatural silence. The screams that had filled the air moments earlier faded away, replaced by the haunting quiet of the ocean. Hundreds of people were left in the freezing water. Most wore life jackets, but the jackets couldn't protect them from the cold. The water was -2 degrees Celsius, 28 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to take a person's life in minutes. Some froze within 15 to 30 minutes. Others tried to swim to lifeboats that had already been launched, only to find them too far away. Inside the lifeboats, survivors listened helplessly. They could hear the cries for help but were too afraid to return. Many boats were not full, were half empty, but the people inside feared the panicked crowd and the water would try to climb aboard and sink the lifeboat. Some survivors never forgave themselves for not going back. 2 hours passed. Then, just as the survivors began to lose hope, a distant light appeared on the horizon. It was the RMS Carpathia. At 4 a.m., the Carpathia finally arrived, having traveled as fast as possible through dangerous icy waters. The crew quickly lowered ropes, lifeboats, and ladders into the water, pulling people aboard, many of whom were numb, shaking, or unconscious. From the cold, some had to be lifted with nets because they were too weak to move. The crew of the Carpathia worked tirelessly. They wrapped the survivors in blankets, gave them hot drinks, and offered comfort. On the deck, people wept, prayed, or sat in stunned silence. They had survived something unimaginable. By 8:30 a.m., all the survivors had been rescued. The Carpathia turned and headed for New York. The Titanic, once the pride of the seas, was now nothing but a memory. More than 1,500 lives had been lost, making it one of the deadliest peacetime maritime disasters in history. But the story doesn't end there. In the days and weeks that followed, the world was shocked. How could a ship advertised as unsinkable be gone? Why were there not enough lifeboats? And most mysterious of all, what about the SS Californian? The SS Californian was a British steamship that had been only 20 miles, just 37 kilometers away from the Titanic on the night of the disaster. Its crew had seen the Titanic in the distance and had even noticed the white flares being launched. White flares were the international signal for distress, but the Californian's captain, Stanley Lord, believed the ship was having a celebration, or perhaps testing fireworks. He went to bed without further investigation. What's even more heartbreaking is that the Californian had turned off its wireless radio for the night. At 11:30 p.m., just before the Titanic started calling for help, the Californian's wireless operator, Cyril Evans, had signed off and gone to sleep. Had the radio remained on just a little longer, they would have received the Titanic's signals. The Californian could have arrived long before the Carpathia and possibly saved hundreds of lives. Some historians believe it could have prevented the tragedy from becoming one of the greatest disasters in history. This decision to power down the radio became one of the most criticized errors in maritime history. Following the disaster, both the United States and the United Kingdom launched formal investigations. The reports were detailed and revealed many issues: the lack of lifeboats, the ignored iceberg warnings, and of course, the failure of the Californian to respond. As a result of these inquiries, the entire shipping industry changed. New maritime laws were passed requiring all passenger ships to carry enough lifeboats for everyone on board. Radios were now required to be manned 24 hours a day. Ship crews were trained to respond to distress flares immediately. In other words, the Titanic had to sink for the world to learn how to sail more safely. But even as safety improved, the Titanic never left the hearts and minds of people. For decades after the ship disappeared, no one knew exactly where it had sunk. It was too deep, resting at over 12,500 feet, about 3,800 meters below the ocean surface, far beyond the reach of divers or technology of the time. Explorers guessed at its location. People told stories. Books and movies kept the memory alive. Then, in 1985, after 73 years of searching, the world finally found the Titanic. Dr. Robert Ballard, a deep-sea explorer, and his team discovered the wreck using advanced robotic equipment. The images they captured stunned the world. The front part of the ship was still mostly intact, resting quietly on the ocean floor. The stern was about 600 meters away, shattered and twisted. Evidence of the massive forces that tore the ship apart as it sank, scattered around the wreck, were haunting reminders of that night. Pairs of shoes still side by side, suitcases, dishes, broken furniture, even unopened champagne bottles. It was as if time had frozen. Since then, the Titanic has been studied, photographed, and explored. Scientists have warned that the wreck is slowly disappearing. Special bacteria are eating away at the metal. Some experts believe that by 2030, the Titanic could completely dissolve, leaving only memories behind. Still, the story doesn't fade. In 2012, on the 100th anniversary of the disaster, Australian billionaire Clive Palmer announced plans to build a full-sized replica of the Titanic II. The new ship would look exactly like the original, from the grand staircase to the luxurious dining rooms, but would include modern safety features like radar, GPS, and, of course, enough lifeboats for everyone. Though the project gained a lot of attention, it has faced delays and is yet to be completed. But even the idea of rebuilding the Titanic shows how much the world still cares. Because the Titanic wasn't just a ship, it was a dream. It was about possibility, achievement, and human progress. But it also became a symbol of how easily those dreams can be lost when we forget to respect nature. Take warnings seriously, or let pride get in the way of safety. Of the 2,224 people on board the Titanic, only 705 survived. More than 1,500 died in the icy water, most of them men. That's because the crew followed the rule: women and children first. Many brave men stepped aside and gave up their places in lifeboats, so that others could live. Some kissed their wives and children goodbye, knowing they would never see them again. Among the survivors were stories of great courage and deep tragedy. Margaret Molly Brown, a wealthy woman who became known as the unsinkable Molly, Brown helped row her lifeboat and encouraged others to stay strong. After being rescued, she raised money for the families of those who had died. There were musicians who played music to keep passengers calm. Even as the ship went down, they played until the very end. There were engineers who stayed below deck, working to keep the lights on and the pumps running, giving others more time to escape. These stories remind us that in the darkest moments, we can still find light in the actions of brave, kind-hearted people. The Titanic also gave us lessons that still matter today. First, overconfidence can be dangerous. The belief that the Titanic was unsinkable led to poor decisions, fewer lifeboats, higher speeds, and ignored warnings. Second, we must respect nature. The ocean is powerful, unpredictable, and doesn't care how advanced our technology is. Nature always wins. Third, preparation saves lives. After the Titanic, safety became a priority for all future ships. Because of those hard lessons, countless lives have been saved since. The Titanic story is more than just history, it's a human story. It's about people from all walks of life, rich and poor, young and old, travelers, dreamers, and workers. Some survived, many did not, but all were part of something unforgettable. And that's why the Titanic continues to fascinate us. It's not just about a ship. It's about ambition, tragedy, courage, and the reminder that in the face of disaster, we can still find hope, learn, and grow. If this story moved you or taught you something new, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mindset English. Through stories like this, not only do you improve your English, you also learn about history, humanity, and the power of never giving up. Let's keep learning, growing, and exploring the world together.